day of Chodesh Teves, and we are learning Daf Pei Vav, Amud Aleph. We are at the bottom of Pei Hey Amud Beis, where the Gemara is quoting from the Mishnah, discussing the Chalonis and Ove HaChoma, the windows and the thickness of the wall. That means the tops of the walls around the Beis HaMikdash, maybe around Yerushalayim, and the status of Kedusha of these areas. The Mishnah had told us that the windows and the thickness of the walls are considered to be the inside, not the outside, with regards to Beis HaMikdash, the Azara, Yerushalayim, etc. Says the Gemara as follows, quoting from the Mishnah, three lines from the bottom of Pei Hey Amud Beis, Amar Rav Ganin. Amar Rav says, Gagin ve'aliyos lo niskadashu. The Gagin, the roofs, ve'aliyos, and the attics, the upper chambers of the Beis HaMikdash, lo niskadashu, were not imbued with the Kedusha of Yerushalayim. Meaning that, or the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash. We'll see what areas we are talking about. Meaning, in order to have Kedushas Beis HaMikdash or Kedushas Yerushalayim, you have to be Mekadesh those areas. And there are different levels of Kedusha and different areas that you would be allowed to eat Korbanos in, and different areas that different Tameim would be allowed to enter, as we have learned previously. And now the Gemara challenges this. What do you mean that the Gagin and the Aliyos were not Niskadish? Is this really so? V'ha'amar Rav, didn't Rav say Mishum Rabbi Chia in the name of Rabbi Chia? This is the same Rav. Kazesa Pischa v'halel paka igra, that you would eat your kazayis of your Korban Pesach, v'halela paka igra, and halal would break through the roof, meaning was on the roof and would extend outwards. They would sing halal on the roof. They're eating their Korban Pesach and they're singing halal on the same roof. Says the Gemara, turning on to Pei Vav Amud Aleph, my love, what do you mean? The Achli be'igra, va'amri be'igra. Does that mean that they would eat the Pesach on the roof and they would say halal on the roof? No, not so. The Achli ba'ara va'amri be'igra, they would eat from the Korban Pesach on the ground floor, bottom floor, va'amri be'igra, and then they would go up to say halal on the rooftop. There's an interesting discussion in the Rishonim why exactly this was the case. Option number one is to ensure that everybody got a chance to eat their Korban Pesach on the ground. Meaning, as soon as you had finished eating your Korban Pesach on the ground, you would leave to go say halal on the rooftop, and then you would make sure to leave the space available for other people to be able to eat their Korban Pesach on the ground, because that space had Kedusha. There is another option, which is fascinatingly discussed, I think, by the Balam Ar, that that they would make sure so as not to eat anything after the Korban Pesach, so they would leave that space. They would go to another place where they didn't have food in front of them to be able to say halal, so that you didn't end up gnashing later on. But either which way, this is not a contradiction against what Rav said, because the Gag and the Aliyos were not Niskadish, and they would say halal at the top, but they wouldn't need to go on Pesach. Says the Gemara, Ini, is this really so? Va'atna, didn't we learn? We'll see this later in the 10th parak. That you're not allowed to eat anything else, meaning, you're not going to have anything else after the Korban Pesach. So Va'amar Rav, and Rav said, that means that you have to have the whole thing in one place. You can't go from one place to another. So we say, Loi kasha, not a problem. This is while they're eating. While you're eating, you're not allowed to go from one place to another, from one group to another. Once you've finished eating on Pesach, then you can go to another location. You don't have to be in the same location for the end of the Seder. Tashma, says the Gemara, come along in here. Abba Shaul told us, Aliyas Beis Kodesh Kedoshim. This is, again, another attempt to reject the statement of Rav, the Gagin and the Aliyos did not have Kedusha. Aliyos Beis Kodshei HaKadoshim, the attic of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, Chamura mi Beis Kodshei HaKadoshim, is even more strict than the Kodesh HaKadoshim itself, meaning it was more limited, more restricted. Why? Because the Kodesh HaKadoshim itself, the Kohen Gadol would go into once a year. V'aliyas beis Kodesh HaKadoshim, but the attic of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, ein nichnasin la ela pam achas b'shavua. They would only go into it once a shavua. Shavua doesn't mean a week. Shavua means, like Rashi points out, b'shmita, once every 7 years. V'amrila, some say pamayim b'shavua, twice every 7 years. V'amrila, and there were those that said pam achas b'yovel, once every 50 years, meaning it was extremely limited. Nobody ever went in there except for once in a yovel, perhaps. Leida mahi tzricha, in order to make sure the structural stability, to know what was necessary. There were anything that needed to be fixed there. Rashi says, they went to go check it out to make sure that nothing was broken, nothing needed to be fixed. And this implies that the aliyos were niskadish, meaning they didn't just go up there for any reason, part of the regular wear and tear check of the Beis HaMikdash. There was kedusha there. They had to have this area limited as much as possible. There was limitation. There was an area that was kodesh there, and that was the aliyah of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Says the Gemara, no, Amar of Yosef. Says Rav Yosef, meheichel neikum v'neisav inish. What you all of a sudden now you're going to bring a contradiction from the heichel, from the building of the Kodesh, the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKadoshim itself? That's going to tell you the halachas of all of the roofs of Yerushalayim? That doesn't make any sense. Shani Heichel, the Beis HaMikdash itself is different. Because there the pasuk says, "Vayitin David l'Shlomo v'nai as Tav Nisa'ulam." The David HaMelech gave to his son Shlomo HaMelech Tav Nisa'ulam, the architectural plans, the structural plans of the Beis HaMikdash. Ve'es Batav, and the houses in it, meaning the different rooms. Ve'es Zachav, and all of the places of the treasuries there, Va'aliyosav, and the attics, the upper chambers, V'chadarav hapnimim, and the inner chambers, Ubeis hakaparis, and the place of the kaparis, that's the gold slab that went on top of the aron, that was called the Beis hakaparis, that's the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Uksiv, and the pasuk says, "Hakol bichtav yad, Hakol bichtav miyad Hashem alai hiskil." All of this is from Hashem to me, his skill to be understood. Meaning, Hashem explained this all to me. Says David HaMelech, I was told all of this through Nevuah. I know exactly what it's supposed to be, and it has to be bidiyuk the way that I'm describing it to you, and therefore those things were all given b'nevuah. The Tavnes Heichel was given b'nevuah. Whether or not the Chachamim made the roofs of the Beis HaMikdash, the other areas, the Azara, or Yerushalayim, Kodesh, has nothing to do with the Heichel and the Kodesh HaKadoshim itself. Says the Gemara, okay, so we can't learn from the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Tashma, come along in here. Halishkas habnuyos b'Kodesh, the chambers that were built in the areas of Kedusha, upsuchas lechal, meaning they were in a area that was Kodesh, meaning they had Kedushas Azara, Lichara, they had the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash, the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash, upsuchas lechal, but they had an opening on the outside. Toichan chal, the inside of these chambers are chal, they are not Kodesh. V'gagazem Kodesh, but their roofs are Kodesh. Now that's not talking about the Heichal, that's talking about the outer areas of the Azara, and it says that their roofs were Kodesh. Says the Gemara, that's not a contradiction. Tir Gemara Rav Chisda explained, B'shegagazem shavim lekarka Azara. What are we talking about here? We're talking about outer chambers whose roofs are equal, meaning they are level with the ground of the Azara, of the courtyard. So we're talking about, here's the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash, which is sitting at the top of Har HaBayis, and then a step down from that, there's a chamber underneath. And the roof of that is Kodesh, because it is on the same level as the Azara. So if this would be true, then the end of this brisa should that tells us b'nuyos b'chol. The end of the brisa that says those that are b'nuyos b'chol, those that are built in an area which is chol, which is not kodesh, meaning it's not the Azara, upsuchas kodesh, and they are opened to the Azara. Toichan kodesh, their insides are kodesh. v'gagusem chol, and their roofs are not kodesh. V'gagusem chol. Those things are not going to be kodesh, which is the opposite. For Ishak, and if you would have thought to say that we're talking about all these areas that are at level with the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, so then what we're talking about here are tunnels, meaning we're talking about underground chambers. That the tunnels themselves did not have Kedusha. Ki kama Rabbi Yochanan, says the Gemara, no, when Rabbi Yochanan told us that the tunnels are not Kodesh, that's talking about b'psuchos lahar habayis, the ones that are open onto Har Habayis, onto Temple Mount. Kitanya hahi, but those Bryce is teaching us b'psuchos lahazara. No, the ones that are b'psuch lahazara, the ones that open into the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash itself, those ones do have Kedusha. Meaning, it's not about the location; it is about where it is open to. V'tanya, and it was taught in a brisa. Rabbi Yehuda teaches us mechilas mitachas heichal, that the tunnels that were underneath the heichal, underneath the kodesh section, the building section of the Beis Hamikdash, chol, those are not kodesh. They were not given kedusha. Meaning, and that seems to be that implies even the ones that open into the azara. Ki says the Gemara Kitanya Hahi. When we are teaching that din, it's also talking about shepsuchas lechol, the ones that they might run underneath the heichal, but the opening is bachol, meaning is outside of the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore it does not have kedusha. Tashma, we have a brisa that says as follows: another rejection of Rav potentially v'gaga kodesh, and the roof of the heichal. The roof of the heichal is kodesh, meaning we said that the mechilos that are Tachas Heichal are not Kodesh, and the Gag is Kodesh, right? The roof is Kodesh. V'tispera, and it's logical to say the following. V'hakatani, he teaches Gaga in Halalu that these roofs in Oichlin Shem Kodesh Kodashim. You cannot have Kodesh Kodashim. You cannot eat from the Chatas. The Kohanim cannot eat the Chatas there. Ve'in Shecht Shem Kodeshim Kalim, and you cannot shecht the Kodeshim Kalim there. You can't shecht shlomim or a Pesach on those roofs. Ve'elakasha gaga kodesh, but he just said that the gag is kodesh, that the roofs are kodesh. So, which one is it? Does it have some kedusha of the azara, or does it not have the kedusha of the azara? Amar of Chama Bar Guria says of Chama Bar Guria la'osin shtei amos. No, that they had kedusha with regards to the placement of the 2 amos. What's that? 2 amos? There were 2 measuring sticks that they kept in the Beis Hamikdash. Ditnan, we learned in the Brayse as follows: Shtei amos hayu b'Shushan Habira. There were 2 measuring sticks, 2 amos sticks in Shushan Habira. Now, Shushan Habira is not talking about the actual city of Shushan. It was an area of the Beis Hamikdash, which was a chamber that was above the eastern gate of the Azara, that had a design or a picture or some architectural motifs from Shushan Habira. This is in the second Beis Hamikdash, and that's why that chamber was called Shushan Habira. Achas al kerem mizrachis tzvenis, one measuring stick was in the northeast corner. Va'achas al kerem mizrachis dremis, and one was in the southeast corner. Zu shal kerem mizrachis tzvenis, the one in the northeast corner. Hayisa yiseru shal al shel Moshe chatzi etzba. V'zu shal kerem mizrachis dremis. Hayisa yiseru ala chatzi etzba. Each one, the one that is in the northeast corner and the one that is in the southeast corner, each one was slightly larger than the amma of Moshe Rabbeinu, meaning the amma mid'araisa, by a chatzi etzba, by half of a finger. So an amma is this, and a chatzi etzba is half of a finger. Nimtzeis, it comes out, Yisera al shel Moshe etzba, that when you put the 2 sticks together, it was bigger than the stick of Moshe Rabbeinu by a full finger. Why do we have a big amma and a small amma, meaning an amma mid'oraisa and an amma that they had in the Beis Hamikdash, which was slightly larger than that. So that the workers that were contracted to work in the Beis Hamikdash, to build the Beis Hamikdash, they were contracted to build things at the price of an amma, meaning they were paid by the amma. You were making carpentry or masonry, whatever it is, they would be paid by making X amount of ammas. They'd be paid by the amma, but the amma that they used, meaning the amma that they charged, that they were charged, that they charged for, that they were paid for, was the standard amma of Moshe Rabbeinu. But when they were building, they were instructed to use the amma sticks that was slightly larger, a fraction larger, half an etzba larger. Why? They would return, meaning the work that they did was in the slightly larger measurement, so that they always had a hedge, they had a buffer zone, that if they made things slightly smaller, they were not stealing from the Beis Hamikdash property. Meaning, it was a slight overestimation to ensure that they didn't violate the Isur of Me'ilah. Otherwise, if you made something just a drop smaller, then you would have violated Me'ilah. Now, some of the Achronim point out that from here, we have, already from the days of the Beis Hamikdash, a discussion of a big amma and a amma amma, meaning that there are certain areas that we are machmir on the amma and certain areas that we're makel on the amma. For example, in Sukkot, so you want to be we're machmir on a tefach, right? So when you have 3 tvachim for lavud, so we make those tvachim as the minimum shir of tefach to know that you're for sure within the range. Versus, for example, if you are building an eruv, so there you want to be, if you want to when you're measuring a gap that is 10 amos, the gap that is 10 amos, that if the gap is more than 10 amos, then that would be a break within the more than 10 vachim would be a problem of a break in the wall of the eruv. So for that, you want to measure. If you want to border it off, then you're going to measure with the larger sizes of the amos. Meaning, in order to be machmir, you need the bigger sizes. Sometimes to be machmir, you need bigger sizes. Sometimes to be machmir, you need smaller sizes. And therefore, you see that in both of these areas, already in the days of the Beis Hamikdash, they were machmir for bigger and smaller shiurim of an amma. Okay, says the Gemara. Okay, at the end of the day, why do you need 2 amma measuring sticks? You can use one. One was used for gold and silver, and one was used for building. One was used for building. These were 2 separate areas, meaning, and there's two ways of reading this. You could say that they had separate sticks, or that one was half an amma bigger. One was half an amma bigger. That was the one for gold and silver, and one was a full. One was half an etzba bigger, and one was a full etzba bigger of Moshe Rabbeinu. When you put them together, it was if you would have put them together, it would have been an etzba and a half larger. So you have G'dala and Ketana for both. For gold and silver, you need a fraction larger, and for masonry and carpentry, it would seem you would need a full etzba bigger. Okay, tonight we learned as follows in the Mishnah: that the windows and the thickness of the walls are considered to be inside. It makes sense to say the windows. That you find you find that the windows of certain of the lishkos were slightly lower, and therefore the window of one room could have been at the same level as the ground floor of the azara. But where do you ever have the thickness of the wall? Meaning the top of a wall. Where's the top of a wall ever going to be level with the floor of the Beis Hamikdash? Says the Gemara, Mishkachas la kevar shura. Now, you found this in the inner wall, that there was an inner wall and there was an outer wall. inside of Harabais. Dirshu, as the pasuk says, v'yavel, the pasuk in Eicha, v'yavel chel v'choma, that the chel and the choma mourned the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. The chel is the inner wall, and the choma is the outer wall, and they were at two separate levels. And those two separate levels, so the outer wall was level with the Azara. Va'amar Rabbi Achon says, V'tem Rabbi Chanina, and some say it was Rabbi Chanina, Shuru Bar Shuru, that means the wall and the main wall and the outer wall. Okay. Final Mishnah of the Parak. The final Mishnah of the Parak is going to sound a little bit strange to us. Talking about the halachas of making chaburas for the same Korban Pesach. Make chaburas, two different seders for the same Korban Pesach. Shtei chaburas. You have two groups that are eating in one house, says the Mishnah. This group is allowed to turn their faces this way and eat, and that group is allowed to turn their faces and eat in that direction. And one can place the mecham, that means the urn, the boil of hot water in the middle, and that they would use for diluting the wine. They would have hot water to dilute the wine, so that the wine was tasty and more drinkable. And we'll get to those halachas a little bit later, meaning by the 10th parak. And when the waiter is getting up, meaning the waiter, a Jewish waiter, is eating with one of these groups, and he gets up to be to do mezikas hayayin, to dilute, meaning to pour the wine for the one group or the other group. So what does he do? Koifetz es piv. He has to shut his mouth, zip it, meaning he can't say anything, he can't even open his mouth at all. U'machzer es panav, and the Meiri explains, as soon as he is finished pouring, he then turns away until he gets back to his group, and then he can continue eating, so that he doesn't end up accidentally eating or even be suspected of eating in the wrong group. V'hakala, and a bride, hofechas es panah, she turns her face, v'ocheles, and she eats. And we'll talk about exactly what that din is a little bit later. What is this din of the kala? Is she allowed to? Is she obligated to? What is going on over here? Okay, says the Gemara as follows. Masnisimani, who is the author of our Mishnah? Who's the Tana teaching our Mishnah? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Titania. Rabbi Yehuda explains as follows in the Brisa. Al habatim asher yochlu oisei bahem. Pasuk in Sefer Shmos. In the houses that they will eat it in them. What does that mean? Melamed, that teaches us that one Pesach is allowed to be eaten in two chaburos. Two chaburos. Alabatim asher yochlu oisei, eating it bahem, in them. So there's one Korban Pesach that is eaten in two chaburos. Maybe that means that you could eat it in two, meaning that the person eating it could eat it in two separate places. One person is allowed to eat his Korban Pesach in two separate places. Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, no, you, the eater of the Korban Pesach, need to eat it in one place. Mikan Amru, from here they said, that if you have a shamash, if you have a servant, a waiter, that eats a kazayis of his Pesach, b'tzad hatana, by the roasting oven, meaning he's busy roasting the Pesach, and he's pretty sure that it's done roasting. So what does he do? He takes a kazayis and goes, it's good. Now he's in trouble. Now he's in trouble because now he cannot leave to go and continue eating in another location. He's just made a chabura there, meaning he's made his space next to the oven. If he is wise, this is how Rabbi Yehuda explains, well, then finish eating there. Fill up your stomach there, because you're not going to be able to eat anywhere else. And if the rest of the guys eating with him want to do a good thing for him, what do? They would come and make their group, their eating group, next to him. Meaning, they'd be kantim, they would make their Pesach Seder next to the oven where he's roasting the Pesach, because otherwise he can't go over to where they are. He's already made his place over here by the oven. So you're not allowed to switch seats. You have to have your seat is here. Now this is where you have to eat. Div Rabbi Yehuda, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon disagrees. Rabbi Shimon says, by the houses they will eat it in them, melamed, that teaches you, sha'ochel oichel b'shtei mekomis. Exactly what Rabbi Yehuda did not want to say. It means that the person that's eating is allowed to eat in multiple locations. Person is allowed to eat in multiple locations. Each person is allowed to move around within the same house. Does that mean that you can switch your groups of people? It seems Talmud Loimar, no, says the pasuk b'bayis echad yachal, you have to eat it in one house, in one group. Now, what exactly is this argument? B'may k'mifligi, the top of Pei Vav Amud Beis, what exactly is this argument? What are they arguing about? Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we will continue and conclude the perek tomorrow on Pei Vav Amud Beis. Hoping everybody has a beautiful day, and we will see you Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach tomorrow.